I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar on business intelligence and data visualization with dashboards. In today's webinar, we'll demonstrate how in a few clicks you can connect to data, and then with just a few more, you can visualize the data by creating interactive dashboards. My name is Karen, and presenting today will be Peter Horning, Unilytics President and CEO. And also presenting will be Eric Tobias, who is our Director of Analytics Services. Before I give the floor to Peter, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. We encourage your questions. If you have any questions, you can send them to Twitter at Unilytics, or you can use the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you're unable to view the control panel, then just click the red arrow as shown below. We'll answer any questions at the end of the webinar. I also wanted to let you know that we're recording the webinar, and we'll make the recording and slides available at the end of the webinar, okay? On our website, sorry. So I'll hand over the floor to Peter now.
Thank you, Karen. So just a brief introduction to Unilytics for those of you who are not familiar with us. We have been a leading provider of digital analytics and consulting services since 2001. We have worked with over 800 customers across North America. We have offices now in Toronto and in San Diego. And we've completed over 450 consulting engagements. And along the way, we've developed some of our own technology, but also worked with leading providers to improve reporting and analytics, particularly on the web analytics side. We've worked with WebTrends, Adobe, SiteCatalyst, and Google. And we have now spent a considerable amount of time working with Tableau and good data for visualization and dashboards. And in a recent study, looking at the value of doing business analytics, it was pretty clear that investments of only $1 delivered $10.66 in return for analytics. And the main reason for that seems to be that it's really very difficult to get access to the information, but if you have the tools to get access to it, there's a tremendous amount of richness that can be harnessed and that will deliver tremendous ROI. And these are both in hard dollar costs like cost savings and sales revenues, but also in intangible things like customer service and greater productivity. So what's so great about dashboards? Well, if we look at the evolution of analytics business tools, it wasn't that long ago that we were doing things manually and with calculators. And about 20 years ago or so, the spreadsheets really hit the ground, and it became a much easier way of doing calculations, but it's still limited to rows and columns. And it really makes it impossible to figure out really what's going on in doing interactive sessions. And so we end up relying on IT and other departments to dissect the data. But as the business users, you kind of know what the questions are that you want to ask. So you need to have a tool to be able to allow you to slice and dice the data and interact with it. And that's where dashboards come in. They're really the new spreadsheets. And it's really the next business tool to allow you to fully explore the data and come up with answers. It kind of breaks that grip of two-dimensional analysis. So dashboards, in our opinion, need to, first of all, emphasize graphics over text. It needs to fit on a single page. If it doesn't, it's a report. It's not a dashboard. It needs to be customized specifically for the information consumer, so we need to be able to tailor it depending upon who the audience is. And it needs to be able to import data from multiple sources. Can't just be from spreadsheets or one source, but data is interrelated, and we want to be able to do that in dashboards. And of course, we need to allow for ad hoc queries and real business intelligence, and we can do that in dashboards. So this is a sample of a dashboard that we've created. Eric will show this a little bit later on in the demonstration. But all of these quadrants in this dashboard, they're all related. You click on one, it updates all of them together. And there's a tremendous ability to drill down into the data and explore it further. So there are multiple approaches to business intelligence. And there are multiple reasons why we like tools like Good Data and Tableau. And while we're talking a little bit about good data here, the focus of our presentation today and the demonstration will in fact be on Tableau. But if we look at sort of how agile are these products, well, traditional BI tools like Cognos and Business Objects and MicroStrategy, they take a very long time typically to generate results. And as an end user, if you ask for your department or IT department to get you certain reports, it often takes months. With good data and Tableau, as long as that data is accessible and well structured, it would be a matter of minutes or a matter of hours. The deployment for traditional tools tends to be software on-premise, as is Tableau. Good data, the reason we've chosen to also work with good data is it's a cloud-based application. How approachable is it? Well, not very approachable in a traditional BI environment. So it's great for the suppliers. They make a lot of money on consulting, but it's really bad for everybody else. And good data and Tableau have their own real strong areas. Good data is particularly strong at importing the data, and Tableau is particularly strong at data visualization. In cost and time to value, again, traditional tools tend to be very expensive, very complex to implement, whereas good data and Tableau are much less expensive, and time to value is very, very short. In a recent customer study done when looking at overall product score, sort of functionality versus ease of use, you can see Tableau scored very, very high, much higher than the other tools. Now, good data was in fact not included in this study, but we would expect them also to be up in the same quadrant. And if we looked at specifically the various things that were being ranked, there were 13 business intelligence capabilities that were being scored from 27 different suppliers. And this is how Tableau scored. They were #1 out of 27 on reporting, dashboards, interactive visualization, and metadata management, and #2 on several others, and so on. So a very, very dominant position in this space. Having a source data and dashboard software isn't sometimes enough. You still may have to import the data into the dashboard, and that can be awkward. Sometimes that data can be sort of in unexpected formats and require cleansing or transformation. So this requires either data cleansing or ETL or a deeper skill set of the dashboard itself. So the three processes then is to do extraction first of all, and that's really the process of obtaining the data from the source itself. Secondly, we do the transformation, which is converting potentially incompatible data and formatting it so that it meets various importing application rules, and then filtering that or translating it into the system itself. And the final component then is loading that data, importing it so that we can start using it in our dashboard. So as an example, if we look at 2012-10-25, I think we all kind of recognize that as a date, but not all systems would recognize that as a date because it's not really in a standard format. So properly converting that string to a date requires extracting each piece of the date one by one and then reassembling them into a standard date format and converting the results into a recognizable date format that we might want to use for our system. And of course, it comes in multiple environments. So you could have data coming from various sources in any one of these. And again, it needs to be translated so that we're using sort of a common language. And this is simply one example. So ETL can be fairly simple, such as a database export, or it can be very complex, such as social media sources. So if we look at the inputs that we have for doing dashboard work, they could come from various sources. We may or may not have to do ETL, and then we can import that into Tableau and view the end results. If it was good data, it would be the same process, but now it would be cloud-based. So some of the connections that are offered, you can see here. I won't read through all of them, but there are many, many standard connections to allow us to grab the data and then work with it in Tableau. We're going to look at two products today from Tableau. One is Tableau Desktop, and the other is Tableau Server or Interactor. And Desktop, which Eric will show first, allows us to really explore and import the data and then craft reports. But it allows you to do a lot of ad hoc queries and answer questions as well. So it becomes a very interactive process in exploring the data. Once you've satisfied that the dashboard is what you want, you then publish it to Tableau server as a web-based application that allows now others to access those reports, those dashboards, which are now very, very interactive. And they can do all kinds of drill down on those interactive dashboards. So some of the services that Unilytics provides is business strategy. Also, we do a lot of work with organizations establishing actionable KPIs. We think this is something that's often missed. And so we spend a lot of time with clients looking at what drivers and what business metrics should be looked at in order to really further the business. We, of course, do a lot of work with dashboards and ETL, and we implement these tools and provide training. We also provide report interpretation and business optimization. So that completes sort of the overview part. I'm now going to turn it over to Eric, and we'll take questions at the end of this session.
All right, let me switch over here really quickly. I'm going to pause the screen for just a second. Okay, so what we're looking at now is we're actually looking at the Tableau server environment. As Peter mentioned, this is a place where you can essentially publish your dashboards. So we're going to walk through a couple of step process here. We're going to log into the Tableau server. Let me do that now. I'm going to log in first of all as an administrator. So keep in mind, Tableau server is just a place to host dashboards and data and make them available through a web browser. But Tableau Desktop is used to actually create these, so we'll be looking at both of those. So first off, we're pulling up our sales analysis dashboard. You'll notice, for example, that we can move around here, move our years around. As we do that, all of our data down here changes. So you'll notice, for example, that the different circles down here, the sizes are different. We can hover over any of the states, for example. We're looking at Illinois. It looks like down here, New Mexico, we see that it has a reddish color. That tells us the profit is negative. We can also continue. Let's drill down a little bit in here. We can click on Ohio, for example. And now we can see all of the data that's specific to Ohio. So as you'll notice down here, we have all of our clients. Let's take a look at some current data. So we'll notice here we actually now have our customer list reflecting 2010 data for Ohio. We even have an individual person here, Craig Carrera. Total sales, we can see that. Some other interesting things we can do is we can actually view the underlying data for that. So what may look like a single data point in your actual dashboard will actually consist of a lot of different data points. Tableau allows you to access those. In this case, we actually do only have the single data point. We can also download those to a text file. So if you have a particular data, let's take a look over here. Look at our technology. We can highlight all of those. We can look in here, view our underlying data. And again, it looks like we actually only have one in there. So let me try a different one. Let's look at Florida, for example. So here's one that we might want to take a look at. Reddish color implies that the profit is not good. Bluish color implies that it's good. So we have a particular person here that has a negative 21% profit rating. And what you'll actually notice is as I hover over these, you'll notice that the highlighting is happening over here. So over here under South, for example, all of our data points are being highlighted. That tells us that this particular person had sales in the South region or the Southern region. It also highlights over here. So you have a lot of different actions that you can take on your data, and that's all configurable from the administrative side of things. Other options that you have from within Tableau servers to do sharing. So you could, for example, embed this in HTML. For example, we actually embed our own in SharePoint. Or you can actually link to it, for example, in an email. So it's image-based. You can set sizes on there, width and height, so you can format this specifically for mobile devices, for iPads, all of that. That's all available via the share. Just to give you an idea then of what other things we can do, let's take a look at how some of the security works. So we're now going to log in as the manager for the southern region. Let me go open up this demo again. So now we're looking at this same dashboard. We haven't done anything differently on this. Same data, same everything, but now what you'll notice, for example, is you'll notice we're looking just at the southern region. So without having to do any additional filtering, without having to do any additional restricting of data, this is all in the same data. We now are able to, by using the server login, we're now able to filter down so they can only see their own data. So now we're looking at Sam's data. Let's take a look down here. It looks like we have some data points that are a little bit negative. We can highlight those. For example, those right there. It looks like we have 6 different data points. And again, as before, we can view the underlying data. So in this case, we can see that there were 6 different transactions. If we want to see the raw underlying data, those are the actual sales transactions that were underlying that. So again, download if we need to, do further analysis. That's the sort of interface that your end users would be using. So that's how that works is all through the browser. So let's actually take a look now at how we would build this. So we will start a brand new workbook. We're going to connect to some data. We're going to connect to a server. And again, this time we're going to log in as the administrator. And starting off, what we're actually going to do is we're going to use this Superstore Sales. It's kind of a tongue twister. So Superstore Sales, we pull that up. And what you'll notice is all of the data comes in. We now have dimensions, dimensions being our discrete data that we break things down by. And we have our measures, which are the numbers. These are the things that we add up or we average, so on and so forth. You'll notice, for example, icons are used all throughout. So this tells us right here, this is actually an equal sign and a pound sign. That's a calculated field. We have hierarchies that are available. We'll go into those a little bit more. We also have string fields, for example, that have an ABC beside them. We'll also have geography is built into Tableau, and we'll see that here in a second. But you also notice that, for example, dimensions are always blue, measures are always green. So Tableau has gone through a lot of effort to make the user interface very, very consistent so that you always know where you're at and what you're doing. So now let's take a look. What our underlying premise was going to be is to recreate the dashboard that we were just looking at. So one of the first things we needed to do is going to be to look at this by a map. What would you expect to be the first thing that you would need to do if you're wanting to draw your data by a map? I would probably try, first thing is to just double click on customer state, and sure enough, there pops up our map. We didn't have to do anything else, go out to any servers or any services or do a lot of importing or embedding an image. It's all built into Tableau. So let's start adding some additional data in here. What would it look like if we added sales? So now you'll notice that the size of the circles has started to differentiate. So you have large circles in some states and you have smaller circles in other states. Tableau, again, did that all on its own. So let's do another double click. Now we want to add some color to that. So now what we're actually showing here is we're showing the profit ratio. So the profit ratio, if it has a dark green color, that indicates that it's highly profitable. But I actually don't think that a light green, dark green works well. It doesn't really differentiate things. So I'm going to change the color scheme that we're using to something that's a little more obvious. I'm going to set the center point at 0. So 0 meaning that it's right in the middle. Anything that is negative profit is going to go toward the orange side. Anything that is profitable is going to go toward the blue side. So we hit that, and we'll actually notice now that everything over the course of time is all profitable. So you have your dark blue, which are more profitable, and the not as profitable, for example, up here in Wisconsin, that only had a 5% profit ratio. And we're actually going to now consider ourselves essentially done with this, so we're going to rename this sales map. Now let's do another interesting thing while we're here. We're going to add order date. And now you're actually going to notice that it's created small multiples of the map. Now, for example, you can see in 2007 we actually had a negative profit in Michigan, so minus 3%. So with the small multiples, that allows you to start differentiating across years. There's better ways to visualize that, which I'm going to show here in a minute. We can actually undo this. Tableau offers unlimited undos, which, believe me, if you create dashboards for any length of time, is going to help you out considerably. But what we can do instead is we can say we want the order date to be a filter. Instead of checkboxes, I don't really like checkboxes. We're going to use a slider instead. So now we're starting to recreate what it was we were looking at. So now we have a slider that allows us to advance or move back the year quite easily. And now we're going to move on to our next step. So our next step, we wanted to, again, start working with some sales. So double click, pops up, everything is very happy. Product category, that was important to us. We wanted to know by the product category. Now let's see, let's go a little bit deeper in here. You'll notice, for example, there's a plus sign. That indicates that you have a drill down in place. So you can drill into that. And we could go deeper than that if we wanted to, but for what we're doing right now, this is pretty good. So you can see that in the furniture category, we actually have 4 different types of furniture within there. We have a bunch of different types of office supplies, a bunch of different types of technology. So a drill down, we didn't even have to do anything to that. For the end user, there's no dragging, no dropping, anything. They just click a little plus sign, and life is grand. So let's add some additional information. Let's add region, for example, to the level of detail. So that now is starting to separate things. So we can see sales. Now for this particular column, there's 4 different regions, and it will start to differentiate those for us. Let's put some profit ratio in there as well. Let's make that part of the color. So now you start to see not only that, but we can start to see how profitable are each of these in total contribution. Let's actually put our color scheme back the way we wanted it. Going to set this to 0 again. So now we're seeing again blue profitable, orange not so profitable. We're actually going to call this now our sales matrix. Okay. Another thing that we can do that's very handy for end users is we can come in. Actually, I'm going to get rid of one of these because it's confusing things a little bit. So let me pull that out of there. So we can, for example, take envelopes, labels, pens. There's all these really little things that we're dealing with that have the group of their own. We can group them together on their own. So we can come in here, click the group button, and you'll notice that it now put them all together. So we can actually rename that. Let's call this desktop supplies. So again, keep in mind what we just did here is we were able to massage the data and change the data on the end user side of things, as opposed to having to go back to IT to say, we need a new query and could you please change things around for us or change a grouping. It's much easier to do it this way. So now another thing we can do is we could say profit ratio. Let's add a filter here. We want to only look at things that have a fairly bad profit ratio. So let's do, that sounds pretty good. Actually, hold on, I pulled one thing out. Oops, didn't want to do that. Okay, so I'm not sure what we did there, but we want to get rid of this filter now. So take everything back to where it was. Okay, so we still have our grouping down there. Okay, we're still good. Let's see, what do we want to do now? Another thing that's very handy to do, for example, is being able to take one of your worksheets. So we have a graphical element there. If we wanted to look at this in its tabular format, so we want to create a crosstab, duplicate this as a crosstab. And now you'll notice, for example, that we have all of the information that we were looking at, and we can start to add data to this. This is an exact numeric equivalence of what we were looking at before. So what we see there is what we see here. And that's pretty much done with a single click. So that's quite easy to do. Let's do yet another thing. We're going to create another worksheet. Let's add some sales in here. Let's add customer name. So one of the things that I notice when we do this is we end up with a lot of bars, which is not really what we want. So let's swap our axes. So we swap that around. We now get more what we want. Let's see. Those are sort of alphabetically, not really what we want to do. So we're going to change our sort. We're going to sort this descending on total sales. So now we get our largest customers at the top. Now let's add profit ratios, so the color will tell us something about each of these. So now not only can we see how profitable they are, but we can see, not only can we see how much were their sales, but how profitable they were as well. Let's add reward level in. Did not want to do that. Customer reward level. Let's add that up here. So now we can see what level are they. Are they platinum buyer, so on and so forth. You will notice that we have a lot of platinum repeating, which is not the best visualization, so let's swap those around. So now we have platinum here, lineup, and then all of the customers that fall into that. So that's just a simple drag and drop. We also have the ability to say what level is considered premier. So we have a parameter we can set on that. Let's say that's 40,000. And then you'll notice, for example, that the screen refreshes based on that new number that we entered in there. What else do we want to do? Actually, I think one of the things we want to do is change our sort in here. So it sorted it by alphabetically initially, which is not good for this scale. So we want platinum, gold, silver, and we want blue at the bottom, hit OK. And now you'll see that platinum shows up at the top of our visualization, which we call that a viz. So for this viz, we have the biggest at the top. Let's see, we also want to have region in here. That's going to be just part of our detail that we want to have. So this will now be called customer segmentation. And then we start to, we also get to the point now where we have another piece of data that we want to be able to include in here. This requires us to connect to a new data. In this essence, what we want to do is include shipping information. So we're going to connect to data. We're going to connect to shipping information now. And now you notice up here that we have two different data sources. And when you click on those, the dimensions and the measures change. So that's how Tableau gives you access to both sets of data at the same time. So let's see, we're creating a new worksheet here. Now let's see, let's add profit data. So again, we end up with our single column chart there. I want to take product category now, add that as a dimension. I want to add region, I want to make that one of the rows. So now you can start to see central, east, southwest on there. Let's get some customer name. We'll put that on the detail shelf. So now you can start to see that there's a lot of lines in here. Let's now add shipping cost. And now actually what you'll notice is it went from being a bar chart to being a scatter chart. And it actually did that all on its own. Tableau knows best practices for visualization. So it's able to very quickly determine what's the best way to display the data that you're looking at. So now we can actually come in here. Let's see, shipping cost, added that. Let's add actually customer segment. That's back over here in Superstore. So customer reward level as part of the color. Now you'll see that in this case we have blue, obviously then we have gold, platinum are the green ones, so these are the people that have spent a lot of money with us, for example. So this looks pretty much like what we would want. So let's call it shipping versus profit. And now the actual dashboard part of it. So this is, we've been constructing the worksheets, which are the individual elements. To actually create the dashboard, we actually come in and actually did not want to create that. We want to right click and say new dashboard. So now we can start to drag and drop these in here. So let's add the sales map. That sounds good. If we wanted the sales matrix, let's add that on the right hand side. Customer segmentation I think would be good down here. And let's add shipping versus profit over here. So that's looking like we want it to. But we can resize things, make that a little bit smaller. We can move our legends around, for example, like that. Zoom in, so we can now see things like here's our Ohio data point. Sure. I think we're actually kind of running out of time. So let me switch really quickly over to our other one. So this is the other dashboard that we did. In this particular case, this was based off of a fairly large data set with almost 3 million rows of data. It's parking tickets that were issued in the city of Toronto. So you can tell $114 million in fines were levied. And this is a large data set because it has almost 3 million rows and probably 30 to 40 fields of information. And the thing to note here, we can hover over things. So for example, now we're looking at Queen Street. We can hover over here, look at King Street. So again, keep in mind the speed with which street address is changing. So as I hover, you'll notice that all of the street addresses change. That's all being done off of the entire data set. So Tableau is really fast. It has an in-memory mechanism that it optimizes for being able to pull this data together really quickly. We can also do searches. Let's see. Let's search for my street. Oh, I guess that's not in there. Main Street. Oh, there's one. So we can find the individual streets. We can also get rid of this. So the map as well, we'll show you some of the map capabilities. So we can click on a particular province or a state, and we'll see what streets do they have tickets issued to them. So it looks like, actually I think one of the interesting things we found out is people that have license plates from Quebec tend to get tickets more often on Queen Street West. We don't know why, but that was an interesting point. To a tune of almost 3 to 1. That's where they tend to get tickets. So we can also then drill down even further. We can look at, for an individual street address, street address 387, there were a total of 10 tickets issued. Here are the tickets that were issued. Tableau allows us to even do lookups, so I could look this up on Google Maps, and it will give us that exact address. Now, looks like we're still loading. Not sure what happened to Google Maps right now, but let me go back to the dashboard. So you can link outside to other applications. Undo this. Let's undo this. You can also search, so if you wanted to know fire. So here's all the infractions related to fire hydrants. You can even click and say, where are all parking within 3 meters of a fire hydrant? If you click on that, now you can get all of the streets where that happened. Number 1 street is Richview Road, and here's all the street addresses. So this is just an example of what you can do. We mainly wanted to show this one to show you the ability to handle large amounts of data really, really rapidly. So I guess at this point we'll take some questions from people. The question, are all of the dimensions and measures you are showing standard or built in? Everything that we were looking at in there, with the exception of some of the count metrics that they had in there, those are all custom. So what happened in this case is we open an Excel file and it automatically reads column headers and turns those into dimensions and or measures, and it's able to determine that based on the data type of the column. So those are all custom that we were looking at. Let's see, it says we already get web analytics reports with web trends and many other on sales and marketing reports. Why would I need Tableau? How would it benefit my organization? I would say one of the biggest weaknesses with most web analytics is their lack of truly interactive dashboards. Web trends, for example, they have great dashboards, but you can't interact with them. So for status reporting, they're really quite good. However, for ad hoc reporting or for what-if scenarios where you want to, like we showed in here, would anybody know to go look at the province of Quebec and see that Queen Street West is where they get most of their tickets? No, and there's really not a dashboard you would create in web trends that would be able to do that sort of reporting. That's something you can only find by being able to interact with your dashboard and hover over things and click on things and have related data automatically appear. So that is one reason why we would say that dashboards are a nice addition to any of the web analytics that you may be doing. Another thing that we're actually going to do, I do know that we have gone over on time. There are a few other things that we would like to show people. If you don't want to stick around, you've certainly been introduced to the basics. We're actually going to show some information on how we would build the data in here. So people that had questions about dimensions and measures, we'll show you how some of that actually works. So if you want to stick around, feel free. Otherwise, if anybody has any questions, if you want to ask those now. We had another question. Do you have any sample dashboards created that include web analytics with sales? We actually can get some of that information. I don't have any of it with us right now. But certainly Tableau does work a lot with e-commerce. So having sales information, we certainly can obtain that. So I guess we'll have your information and we'll get in touch with you after the webinar. So anybody else, if you have any questions, feel free. Otherwise, I'm going to continue with some of the other dashboard stuff that we were talking about. And please feel free to email us if you have additional questions. Come visit us on our website at unilytics.com. This webinar will be put up onto the website, so if you would like a review of it, there's also lots of literature on our site. We'll soon be putting up some interactive examples on our website as well, so you can see how Tableau works in a browser environment. But other than that, I'm going to continue on with some of the other dashboard stuff. Feel free to drop off if you need to. If you are interested, please stick around. Okay, so let me come back over here to where we were. So we're building a dashboard. So let's see. One of the things that we wanted to highlight was the ability to set up actions. So you'll notice now when I hover over things or I click on things, none of the dashboards update. Well, I actually can start to link some of these together. So let's say, for example, we want the year. We want to make this global so it influences everything on the dashboard. So we do that. And now you'll notice all the dashboards have slightly changed, and as I move the year slider, all of the dashboards change. So with a single click, we are able to now take a filter and make that into a global filter that affects all of the visualizations on that dashboard. Other things that we can do, we could say, take this map, let's actually use it as a filter. So when we say use it as a filter, we mean anytime you click values in there, use that to filter the other data. So we can do that, and now you'll notice if we click on Ohio, for example, it filters everything, which is good, but it actually filters some data that we don't want filtered. Because if you look down here, there's just too few data points for it to really make a lot of sense to us. So what we're also able to do is we can come in here now into the dashboard, go to our actions. This was automatically generated for us. We can actually now edit this. And let's say we don't want this to apply to the sales matrix or the scatter graph that we had, so let's hit OK on there. We do, however, want to create a highlight. So let's create a highlight where, let's see, what do we want to do here? Let's take the customer segmentation and the sales map, and let's make those highlight the sales matrix and shipping profit. So we can kind of mix and match these to our heart's content. For example, the parking ticket dashboard, it actually has, I think, 6 or 7 different actions that all interact with each other. So you can make some very, very rich environments here. So now we do that, and you'll actually notice now that we have to unclick. When we start to hover over these, do we set that up right? I think we may not have set that up right. No, I did not set that up right. Let's see what we did wrong here. Oh, we did a select and not a hover. My mistake. So we had to change it to a hover. Hit OK. So now I'll actually notice that down here we're starting to see that certain of the fields start to be highlighted and unhighlighted, if you will. So you can start to show these and how they relate to each other, and you can start to draw people's focus, which is kind of one of the whole points, is to get people to look at the right data rather quickly. But this is essentially the equivalent of what we were looking at in that first dashboard. And then the last thing we actually want to do is show you how the data was constructed. So we're going to create a brand new dashboard. Let's connect to data. In this case, let's say we're coming from an Excel set of data. And we want to pull this Excel file. In this case, what we do is we pull in multiple tabs. So we need to say multiple tables. Right now we have the order table. Let's add returns. We need to choose a left join. And that simply means that all orders will exist and they may or may not have returns. So let's make sure it's joined on order ID. And this is about as complicated as it gets for most clients, is knowing how to join tables together. And normally you would end up having a semi-technical person that would handle that sort of responsibility. But once you set that up, end users don't have to worry about that anymore. We do have some options here about what to do with data. You can connect live to data, in which case that means if the underlying data changes, your visualization will automatically update. In addition, you have the option to import data. So if you have a very large data set, for example, and you need to take it home to work on it, you can either import portions of that data or you can import all of that data. In this particular example, we're going to connect live. You'll notice, for example, it went through and it picked out our two tables, orders and returns. And it did, for example, mistakenly consider order ID to be a measure, which is not correct since it's just a reference number. Drag and drop. So we move that up there. Now that becomes a dimension. So that's what we want to do there. And let's see, another thing that we probably want to do while we're in here is under the status, if we come look into here, field properties, we're going to notice that sometimes there are nulls, and that means that nothing was returned. So let's actually indicate that. So again, keep in mind, none of this is being written back to the underlying data. This is all being stored in metadata within Tableau. So in most cases, you don't have to go back to IT to make changes to how your data is structured. You can do it all on your own. For example, we also had some, we had set up some hierarchies in there. So let's see how we do that. We can make a hierarchy of geography here. We'll actually call it that, customer geography, which consists of region and then the state. And we even have zip codes, so let's add that. We can create a hierarchy now for our products. We had a product hierarchy. So let's take the product subcategory, drag that onto category, and we'll call this products. Let's see, there should be some, product name, that also goes in there. So drag that down. So now you can see very quickly, very easily, we have now just created two different hierarchies. Let's see, what else do we want to do? Let's try out a calculated field. So one of our questions about built-in or custom, so these all came from the underlying data, but we can actually create our own fields as well. So let's create a new calculated field. Let's call this profit ratio. We use that all over the place, obviously. So profit ratio, that would actually be, let's see, that would be profit divided by sales. In this case, we're actually going to want to make this the sum of. So let's put some sums in there. Another thing to keep in mind, as most people that are familiar with Excel would know, is if you divide by 0, you get errors. So Tableau has a whole wealth of functions at your disposal to help you handle those sorts of situations. So for example, there's a 0 null or 0 nothing. That will take any zeros that are in there and essentially replace them with nothing so that you never get an error if there happens to be a 0 in there. So that's what that function is. You'll notice that we also get interactive information telling us that the calculation is valid. So if you, for some reason, do something that isn't valid, like in there, I removed a parenthesis, it will tell you there was an error, it will tell you what the errors are. So we can do that. Let's hit OK. This would be the profit ratio would actually be percentage. So let's do that. Field properties, number format, percentage, 2 decimal places is fine. So that's that. Now let's actually see if this works. So there's profit ratio. We saw that earlier. Let's add date in there. You will notice that in some cases, Tableau recognizes hierarchies already. So for example, dates always are recognized with hierarchies. So we click the plus sign and we drill down into quarters. So you'll notice though that these are kind of jagged from each other. We can actually, and this is quarter 1 versus quarter 2. Let's say we want to do year over year instead. We can just change the sequence. And now we have quarter 1 for 2007 versus 2008 versus 2009. Again, no change to the underlying data, you just drag and drop. Another thing that we can do, dates, it's a little bit hard to understand, so let's actually rename that to order date, because that's where it came from. Again, you'll notice nothing breaks. So all of the references all throughout Tableau automatically update. It doesn't break anything. That makes life much easier than in some other applications. Another thing we can do is we can actually come in here. Let's say we want to know what's the average for each of these years. So let's say we want to add a line. We want that line to be the average. Hit OK. And now for each quarter, we can see what the average was across all 4 of those years. So these are just some examples of what you can do inside the data. Then you can actually, at this point, I could go back up to the server and I could publish this data back to Tableau server. And then people would be able to use this inside their own environment. They could then, as you saw earlier, they can connect to data, choose Tableau server, and all of the work that you've done suddenly becomes available to them. So that's a good example of how that works. And that's really everything that I wanted to show inside Tableau. Let's see if we have additional questions in here. Can Tableau data source data from a SQL table? Absolutely. Let me click on the connect data again. What you'll see over here on the left is here's a list of all of the different databases that Tableau understands. Certainly Microsoft SQL Server is one of those. Oracle Essbase, PostgreSQL, Microsoft Access, Vertica. There's even a generic ODBC connector that's available. And on those, that's generic. You should always use the vendor-specific one whenever possible, but in a worst-case situation, you can rely on the generic connectivity of ODBC. Let's see, any other questions? Does not look like we have any other questions. So I guess at this point, then I'll turn it back over to Karen. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks everyone for attending the webinar. I hope you found it interesting and informative. If you have any questions, please contact us on our website, www.unilytics.com, or you can email us at info@unilytics.com. Oh.
We actually have one other question, so let me jump in really quickly. Can we create segments on the tool? Yes, you can do that using calculated fields. You can say that was what the premier threshold was that we showed earlier, where you could segment people as platinum, gold, silver, or blue. That was all done through calculated fields. So yes, you can do that segmentation on the fly dynamically. Let's see, create customized segment and save it for future purpose. Well, any of the definitions that you put into the underlying data are available. So if you make them part of the data set and then you publish that data set, then everybody has access to those. So assuming that I'm understanding what the question is, then yes, then that customized segment, it doesn't necessarily go into a generic library that's always available everywhere, but it becomes part of the underlying data set itself.
Okay, we will be sending a link to the recording of this webinar to everyone who attended. And so you can, if you have any other questions or want further explanation, we would be happy to provide it. Just reply to the email. And so other than that, I'll say goodbye for now, and thank you for attending.